Hello, Mysidians. I've got a deal for you. If you use Cards of Ivalice to do your FFTCG shopping, you can get a deal using the promo code PALEM10. That's PALEM10, and it will give you a discount on your order. You can also show that you support the Mysidia Post that way, and it helps me out a lot. So use the promo code PALEM10 and enjoy your purchase. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Mysidia Post video. My name is Alex Scott.
Hey, I'm Travis Pfeifer.
And today we're going to be talking about card erratas if we were the developers. So basically we're going to take a look at some cards that maybe we think aren't strong enough or cards that are too strong, and we're going to make some changes to them.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to get into the first card now.
Here we go. All right, our first card is Aloha from Opus III. I mean, I don't really think this card needs an introduction because everybody knows it and it's so strong. This card has recently just kind of become the bane of my existence. So here's my thing with this card. It's a 3-cost, 6k body, which is, under curve, but it's got a shield on it and it has haste. And so once a turn, and it's your turn and your opponent's turn, the first summon or ability that targets her, it gets canceled. People like to refer to that as her bubble or her Aloha shield. 3-cost, haste, bubble shield, 6k body. I think that would be fine. That would be a very strong card just on its own. My issue with this card is Shield, which is her special move, because it's freaking ridiculous. For the cost of a single Aloha card, you activate every forward on your board. You give them all haste, and every forward your opponent controls loses 2,000 power. Why? That makes no sense. There is no summon in the game that can give all your forwards haste. This is legit currently the only ability that does that, as of Opus 10. And it's just, if it's going to have that many effects, it needs to cost more. It needs to be like an Aloha and 2 lightning or 3 lightning. I don't understand why it has 3 amazing effects for the single cost of 1 card. I was facing Kyle Peters at a local qualifier and legit was like going in to win. I'm like, oh, he's got 1 card in hand. And of course, and it popped up and I ended up winning that match. But the other night, I was playing mono ice against like a Rampier deck, and I legit only had 2 damage. And this guy took me from 2 to 7 in 1 turn because of an Aloha Shoal. And especially now with Hurdy, where they can get back the other copy, so they don't even have to have 2 in hand. It's just so frustrating. You'll just get this whole board down. They're like, nope, it's entirely active. And again, if it's going to do all those things, it just needs to cost more. It's insane that this single card costs 1 special. I always think of Sabin from Opus 4. His special requires a Sabin card, 2 fire CP, 2 colorless CP, can only be used when he's attacking, and it nukes the entire board, including your own board. But this card, for just, nope, I'll plop down an Aloha, and all the forwards are back, they all have haste, 2,000, surprise, you're dead. Oh, hate it.
Yeah, so this card's become even more prevalent because of Hurdy, because the special used to actually cost 1 Earth and a generic when you brought it back with Minor. So you'd bring back the second copy and then you did pitch it for the Shoal. But now with Hurdy, it's just rampant, and you're just on a clock against Rampier sometimes. If they start strong enough and they have lots of forwards, their Aloha draws away from being able to finish you off. So now we have a ton of break zone hate removed from game stuff to kind of combat this. But the card probably does too much. You could probably take away one of the things. I don't know what you're gonna end up suggesting here, but maybe the special costs more, or there's no bubble, or there's something that it has to lose something.
Yes. If I were so my final word on her as far as design, I would either make it cost 2 lightning as well as the Shoal. So again, that way you at least have to have 2 cards in hand to activate it, or backups up. You can't just go bloop. Or if you didn't want to add cost to it, I would honestly, the only thing I would let it do, I would make it give all your forwards haste. Take away the lose power, take away the activation. It doesn't need 3 incredible effects, 3 board-wide effects for the cost of a single one. So I would either add at least 2 lightning to it. I could even see the argument for 3 for how good this is. Or I would take away the activate and the lose power and just make it no, you can give because giving your entire board haste, that's incredible too on its own. So that's what I would do.
I think that it, like, losing 2 of the 3 of the special abilities would be a lot. So I definitely think that, like, maybe take away the activation, because that's crazy. Like, if you have stuff dull frozen and then they just completely reactivate their board, or take away just the power reduction and give everybody haste. Although, like, in an aggressive deck where it's supposed to be, that's a really big part of it, helping finish off your opponent. But in Rampier, like, all your forwards are already like 9Ks and 8Ks, and
right.
And like, you don't actually need the power reduction that much. But it certainly helps. The one thing about the increasing the cost, I'm kind of interested in that, is when you put like a 2 lightning CP tag on there, all of a sudden this deck doesn't go as well in Rampier. And sure, Rampier does have lots of avenues for lightning CP, but it's not a given. Like, you're not going to have necessarily 2 lightning backups out. You're not going to have a lightning card in hand all the time. All of a sudden it becomes really hard to cast the special. Mono lightning is obviously easy, and lightning X is it's going to be easy, but it actually nerfs Rampier a little bit. So I actually kind of like that it makes it harder to play in 3-color decks.
Glad you agree. Yeah. Hate you a little. Get out of here.
Okay, let's move on to the next one. All right, so for this next card, we are going to go back to a faraway land known as Opus IV. A bright young FFTCG player enters the room. His name is Alex Scott, and he has just bought his first box of FFTCG trading cards, and he pulls a bunch of Final Fantasy VI cards, and he's so excited, and he sees Umaro, and he puts it into all of his decks. Turns out the card isn't as good as he thought it was, and it becomes a staple in his binder. So this card is a 6 CP forward 9K EX burst. He's a Job Yeti, which is amazing, and his ability is when he enters the field, you search for a monster and add it to your hand, which is really good. Like, search on a forward with an EX burst. Those are all, everything sounds great so far except for the 6 CP. And then he has the Umaro must attack once per turn if possible, and then he has a pretty serviceable special too, Body Slam. 1 Umaro card, and then dull him, choose 1 forward, deal it 7,000 damage. So there's a lot of good things that we're working with here, but the cost is just too high. 6 CP plus he must attack once per turn. It's just too much of an investment. So I'd simply like to see this guy at 5 CP as just a really cool way to search monsters. We have other monster searchers now anyway, and he already, like, that has to attack once per turn is already like a pretty strong demerit, because you're walking into all of your opponent's combat tricks. So I just don't think he needed to be 6 CP, but that seemed to be the way they costed stuff at the very beginning of this game. Like, they costed Lightning and Caius and all these other cards at 6 CP with search on the forward because they're too scared of making it a 5 CP Reagan. What do you think?
That didn't last long. So I'm actually going to go a different direction with him, even though I agree the 6 CP is way too much for what he does. I mean, I'm just not a big fan of anything that has a mandatory effect. You know, you have to attack, especially when it comes to you have to attack, you have to block. I love the Opus II Legend Cecil, but the fact that he has to block everything is just, it just takes away so much from him. So if that's going to stay on there, I honestly would almost rather see another effect added to that, so that when he attacks, he dulls a forward, or he does 2,000 damage to a forward, or something, so it gives him just that little extra boost when he has to attack. That is one way I would go with it. Otherwise, I 100% agree, especially when you see stuff like Reagan nowadays. You're like, and Heian, who's, Hein, who's 9,000 on his own, and he's 4 costs. It's just like, God, this guy is way too expensive. I honestly wouldn't mind if the special did more as well, since it requires him to dull himself. I don't know, just 7,000 for that. I think that could have easily been his power, like deal it, Umaro's power or whatever.
And I bet you if this was printed next set, the special would say deal damage equal to Umaro's power.
Yeah.
The thing we have to Preserve here for me is the flavor of the card, and if you play Final Fantasy VI, you don't actually control Umaro. He is Berserk, and he's always attacking. So I'm totally fine with the must attack, purely not on a design standpoint, on a flavor
thematic standpoint.
He is a crazy Yeti. He needs to be able to attack. So
that's fair.
Yeah, so
they need to give him a card called the Blizzard Orb that you can put underneath him, and then he'll randomly cast
there you
Blizzard
go.
too.
Yeah, yes, exactly. That would be so cool. Well, if they ever have equipment, that would be really cool.
Right.
Yeah. Now, that being said, now that I'm done Reunion and I'm playing lots of fun decks again, hey, maybe I'll bust this guy out. We'll see what he does. He could search a Scale Toad,
Right? That's true. That would be pretty good.
Okay, moving on.
All right, since you just touched on theme and thematic, I want to bring up one of my favorite cards in the game, which is Arden from Final Fantasy 15. Arden is the main villain from 15. I love this card, man. Look at his pose. He's just got that, holding his hand out. You can see my hand on camera. So Arden is brave, 9k forward, 7 cost. And, well, of course, what makes Arden so amazing is that he cannot be broken, which means... basically most people's opinion of this card seems to be either he's incredible or he's worthless. And as I've played with him a lot, I've played against him a lot. So his effect is very thematic because if you've played the game, he cannot die. However, in the game, it's not that he can't die. It's that when he does die, he's just immediately revived and sent back. So I was wondering about changing this card in one of two ways. Because here's my thing. Currently, the way to get around him is at the start of the attack phase, your opponent can crack a character to make it so that Arden cannot block. And it can be anything, backup, forward, monster. And just in playing, it just feels like it's a bit too easy to get around him. If you're pulling him late game, if you spend 7 CP to drop a 9k forward on the board, that should be a big wall for you. But the fact that they can go, oh, okay, here's this backup. Oh, okay, here's this Layak or whatever monster. Now he can't do anything. It just makes him so easy to get past sometimes. And it feels really deflating, like, oh, yeah, well, he's sitting there and he can't do anything. Especially because if it was like this card cannot be removed from the field, period, that would be one thing. But he can be dull frozen. You can make him lose his power to 0, and then he goes away. You can remove him from the game. So there are ways to deal with him. You can technically blank him with Yuri or Kuchulain and then break him that way. So there are so many ways to deal with him. So here's what I would be curious to see. I don't know if it would be better, but I would just be – and honestly, this is one of those weird cards where I would be so curious to know how it worked. Let's really keep him thematic with the game. So it's not that he can't be broken, but it's that he always comes back. So when he dies at the end of your turn or next turn or whatever it would need to be balanced, Arden automatically comes back onto the field. That would be interesting. And that would be thematic because, again, that's what happens in the game. You can kill him. He's just going to come right back. That would make it so that he could still block for you or they could break him with Diabolus, but guess what? You're going to get him back at the end of the turn, and he can be dull or whatever. Now, that was a little more complicated. So what I was thinking might be an even easier solution is I would give him, instead of the whole sack a character, make it so he can't block effect, give him an effect similar to Cagnazzo from Opus 2, where that Cagnazzo cannot block parties. And that's what I would do to Arden as well. Arden cannot block parties. So that way, if your opponent has a big board, they can still get past him. Because I understand why that effect is there. Because if you drop an Arden against Mono Fire and he didn't have that effect, technically you could never get past this guy. It would be impossible. And so I know they didn't want that. So if it's that he couldn't block parties, again, with enough forwards, you could still get past him, but you couldn't just go, oh, I've got 6 forwards, you got Arden, sack a character, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you're dead. You would have to, okay, well, I've got to party them up so they can attack in pairs. That would be my... Again, it's not that he's bad right now, but it's frustrating to see how easy it is to get over him, and I feel like that would give him a little more relevance. What do you think, Alex?
My only question is, you're playing Earth and you let your opponent get to 6 forwards. I mean... Come on.
Well, okay, so, and you guys can criticize me this for if you want, because I don't have every single card in the game. I don't own Shantoto.
Oh, yeah.
So I do not have access to the board wipe, and I don't want to pay for the card. So, yeah, I don't own that card.
Yeah, fair enough. You know what? Like this card, I think is honestly great the way it is. Although I don't dislike your your idea for it either. I think those are both really, really cool ways for it to work. I really think the only reason that people might shy away from it right now is because of Rampier, because it gives your opponent the final piece of their combo automatically.
Yeah,
they just
can just break it for free
on demand, and then that deck also features power reduction. But it's actually pretty hard to reduce Arden's power because you have to do the full 9k, 9 to 10k,
right?
And like, are you going to use 2 different power reductions? Like, there's no power reduction over, like, besides Cloud of Darkness, there's not that many ways to do it. So you'll have to invest in a lot in getting rid of him. So yeah, I can see the coming back is kind of interesting. Then it's like, it doesn't even matter if the party attack thing, because like whatever aggro deck it has is playing against him is going to have removal anyway. It's going to have like that bypass and that this person can't block and all this kind of stuff. So I think that would work. Yeah.
And to clarify a few things, Arden is by no means one of these cards like Aloha, where I think this card really could use a fix. I do think he's fun, but I would just be interested to see, man, how would he work? Because I can honestly say, as much as I played this card, he's never gotten removed. But I think that's what made it frustrating, is that he doesn't have to get removed because they can just go right past him. And that is frustrating. So I would be very curious to see what he would be like if you gave him those tweaks.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Okay, next up we have a Final Fantasy IV card, because this is the Mysidia post. We need to talk about Final Fantasy IV cards. And we're going to start off with Palem, Opus 5 Legend. This is a 5 CP fire forward, draw Black Mage. When Palem enters the field, if you control a card named Porum, draw 1 card. That's great. Okay, when Palem enters the field, choose 1 forward, deal it 7,000 damage. That's really good. 2 generic CP, dull 1 active forward, choose 1 forward, deal it 1,000 damage. That's not good. It's not a good ability. And then Palem's text, or his power, is 4,000. That's pretty bad. So I understand that this is not meant to be a standalone legend. You have to build with Porum to play with this card, and that at a 3 CP kind of like cycle draw card, that's all pretty good. It still hasn't seen any play, and we have a lot of really good Porums in the game. We have fire water decks that have seen play, and I feel like they really, really overcosted the card's abilities. Like, it could be a 5 CP, that's fine, but just the 2 and dull and active forward, at that point you're dulling a forward that's a blocker, and you're also paying like 7 CP to make his 7k ping and 8k ping, and like, there's enough conditional happening with this that it could have just been like 1 generic CP and dull and active forward. It could have been 5 to 6,000 power, and they wouldn't have been killing anybody. But I just feel like this is like, and in a set that had an amazing amount of absolutely incredible legendaries, that they made this card that is just totally hamstrung. And yeah, I would have loved to see this card a little bit stronger.
Oh man, I'm going to be meaner than that. I think this card's awful, and especially like you said, you have to compare it to its contemporaries. It came out in Opus 5, which has some of the craziest legends in the game. And it's just like, oh, that's an Opus 5 card? And just comparing it to the Porum that came in Opus 5, that card is an EX burst, 4 cost. Like, I think it has even more attack power. I think it's 5k attack. Has an incredible effect when it comes in, which doesn't even let your opponent see the cards. And has an incredible second effect where it can cancel an action ability. And like you said, like, it seems a lot of the Palems always seem so tied to the Porums. Like, why do you have to have Porum to draw the card? Like, the 7k entry is good, but like, 2 cost and you got to dull something just to do 1,000 damage. That's terrible. That's like objectively a terrible cost for such a low effect. 2 CP and you have to dull forward and you blow something up for 5k, for 8k, 7k, whatever. That makes more sense. But you're going to put all that in for 1,000 damage? Why?
Yeah, and you know what? You can look at, we've got Balgavin 5 CP. Was that a 5 CP 7 or 8k forward that deals 7,000? You've got Cloud that on 4 damage becomes a deal 7k, and he's a 9k forward with another ability. Vivi, if your opponent has 3 cards in hand, is a 3 CP deal 7k. to afford. Like, there's so many other cards that do this card's job better. The only reason you would ever play it is for the cycle ability of its card draw, which is actually really good. Like, it's really good to be able to pitch cards out of your hand you don't like and then draw a new card to refill your hand. But it's just too much work for what you're left with after, which is a shame, because they got this really cool character illustration too for this card, and it's just
artwork is great.
Yeah.
So what specifically would you just make it cheaper? Would you change the action ability? Because I think we both agree the first two effects are much better than...
Yeah, I think I would just have to be like a 6k forward, and then it's a little more competitive on the field, and maybe just change its action ability, because its action ability would work really well in a fire-based deck that had some water for the Palem. Otherwise, like it's you can't pay that cost to reliably add on to your pings. But it would be really cool if you're playing this and then you have, like, you play a Vivi and then it's just one extra CP and dulling that Vivi that just came in, and now that Vivi gets 1k more. Like, that could be really good, but I think the card just needs more.
Agreed.
That's the pose. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go into another card here.
Okay. All right. Our next card is what the Midgar blog referred to in a random article as the Scourge of the game, and that is Opus III Zidane. Everyone knows what this card is. 3 cost, 3k character. When he enters the field, your opponent reveals their hand. You select a card from it, and then you make your opponent discard that card. And then if your opponent has 2 cards or less in their hand, Zidane gains 4,000 power. So much about this card annoys me and everybody, and it's incredible. If it didn't have that, if it just had its first effect, it would already still be incredible. The fact that it tacks on that, it can randomly be 7k, just feels so unnecessary. Like, there's a reason that Pain card, that Searcher Pain, is like 3,000k. The fact that this card, under the right circumstances, can actually, like, compete with your opponent's board is ridiculous. And it is the only form of targeted discard in the game. And I get what they were going for. Yes, it's very thematic. Oh, get it? He's a thief, so he takes your cards. That's fine. But I just don't like the targeted... I'm sorry, you should not be able to look at... Not only do you get to see their hand, so you know everything they're playing, like, especially if you drop this early, which is when everyone wants to drop it, you know what they're playing, you see what they have in their hands, so you know what kind of answers they have, and especially if you drop it early and they're going to, like, try to play that on-curve backup. Oh, I don't think so, but... Oh, did you have a Shantoto to answer this big board? Yeah, I'll take that. Bye. That's ridiculous. So what I would make this card do... I almost said take off the 4K power buff, but I could live with that being on there if you change the first effect. What I would have it do is it enters the field, your opponent reveals their hand, but they get to choose what to discard. So therefore, you do still get to see their hand, and it gives you that advantage. You know what's coming, and you're still making them discard, but they get the choice of what it is. Like, I'm sorry, just the fact that your opponent gets to choose, best card in your hand, you need to get rid of that. Ridiculous.
Can I ask you a question?
Ask away.
When you use steal in Final Fantasy, does it bring up an option of all the items that the monster has to steal?
No, it doesn't. As a matter of fact, usually what it says is, you can't steal from your opponent, or it failed, or whatever the text is. That's a great point. I hadn't even thought of that.
How about Zidane? When Zidane enters the field, your opponent flips a coin. If it's heads, they reveal their hand, and you get to flip a card.
If not, steal failed. Yeah, you couldn't steal from your... Or it'll say had nothing to steal or something like that.
Oh, people would hate that. So I would be
I like that, though. That's hilarious.
I'd be fine if they stripped the power boost. I hate that this trades into 7Ks.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing that the Zidane player would want more than for you to kill their Zidane so they can play the next one in their hand. So
right.
I think that's too much. I think it could be boosted by 3k. I think it could be not boosted at all and then keep its ability. I think it could keep all the text and go to 4 drop, and just really force your opponent to pitch that extra card to play it early. Because that's kind of like what sucks is it wrecks the curve of the game if you've just drawn the backups that you need and you need to curve into to get to that like super important third backup and they just strip it out of your hand. Well, they're not going to be able to play it turn 2 as easily if it costs 4 CP. They're going to lose an extra card too. So it would make it a lot better. It would still be great late game, but it would be much worse in the early game. So that could have been a better way to print it too.
So what option would you go for? Would you keep the targeted? Would you just make it cost? Because again, for me, even though I think all that would help, I think all that would be good. Personally, I just don't like the targeted. I don't think that should be a thing in this game. I think that the discard already hurts you so much. You just lost 2 CP. You just lost whatever that card's effect is. Like, so to me, that's already hurting you enough. The fact that your opponent then also gets to choose it, to me, that's too. So what would you change specifically?
They want like targeted discard to be Wynn's identity. And by the way, so there's the Legend Zidane that looks at the opponent's hand and discards only a forward. And there's actually a 2 CP Thief backup that breaks to do the same thing. Look at your opponent's hand, discard a forward from their hand. So those are both. That's another thing that this could have been, discard a forward from their hand.
Yeah, so that feels like you can play around it. Okay, hey, sorry, I just got backups.
Yeah, or the fact that you just can't, even if it's like discard a forward or a summon or monster. Like, I know they don't want to flood text, but the taking the backups part of it is the really, really frustrating part. That's the one thing about this card that I'm really frustrated by. I think that though ultimately I would just be fine if he didn't get to 7K, and I don't care how they balance that, but if he only got to 6K max, then I would find that acceptable as an errata for this card.
Can I make a comparison?
Sure.
I absolutely love the Opus 8 Legends Zidane water one, and I think that card is so well designed because it has an incredible effect. When it deals damage, you draw 2 cards, and it has a way to feed into itself, which is that, if you have 6 cards, it's unblockable. But it's because it's balanced by the fact that it's 2 CP and it's 3K, and that's it. It's so weak that it's incredibly easy to get rid of, so it has this neat little system built into it as a way for him to sneak by. But again, they just need the smallest of pings and they're getting rid of him. I think that's, like you said, the fact that this thing can go up to 7K, it's like, now this thing's trading with one of my forwards too. Like, and because of the way that works, because it's always 2 cards or less, if you're already on low cards, you can't even play something because now you've just powered it up. So anytime you like put something down or summon something, you're now just making the card stronger. So,
Fair enough. All right, I think that's going to be it from us today, and this is something that we might bring back in the future, but thank you so much for watching. I'm Alex Scott.
I'm Travis Pfeifer. Hey, let us know in the comments, did you agree? Did you disagree? Are we full of it? What are cards you would like to see errata? What are little changes you would make? Like, if it just did this differently, I would be so much better. Please let us know, because we'd love to hear it.
Yes, but don't yell at us, because these changes aren't really happening, and we understand that, there's all sorts of opinions on these cards. So
absolutely.
Until next time, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you so much for watching. You can like and subscribe to support us further, and you can read the Mysidia Post articles at themysidiapost.com. You can also check out our Patreon if you want to support us more. And if you need FFTCG singles, then look no further than Cards That You Release. They've got great deals and prices. Check them out. Finally, I'd like to thank FF Decks for creating the best website for creating your Final Fantasy trading card game decks. They've also got a Patreon, so make sure you go check them out. They work so hard for the community, so let's pay them back. See you next time.